historically, if we look at the history of money, it was tied to gold, it was tied to other hard assets that
Right.
the growth of money essentially meant the degradation of our environment. Those two went hand in hand.
Mm.
But in this case now, if we tie the value of our money to the climate, to nature-backed assets themselves, we should see a growth in those nature-backed assets because we're essentially incentivizing the growth of that. And I think that's really exciting to me because we can completely change the way that money actually operates and the way we think of money itself.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, Grok on Crypto. Today we've got Celo back here on the show. Today I've got Nikhil Raghuveera, who is a partner of strategy and innovation at the Celo Foundation. And today we're going to be chatting all about the Uniswap version 3 launch. We're going to be talking about how green asset pools work and a bunch more. So Nikhil, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So just to kind of kick things off, what all is happening with Celo and Uniswap? Just kind of give us the high level, what's going on, and then we'll dive into all the details from there.
Yeah, so the big news here is that Uniswap v3 is now deployed on Celo. And so that means that any users on the Celo blockchain can basically utilize Uniswap v3 for swapping their assets.
All right, that was a high level overview. That's good. All right, so kind of walk us through maybe on both the Uniswap side and the Celo side, like what that really means. And so like if I am a Celo user, what does that look like now that we have this Uniswap kind of capability? And then someone who maybe is new to Celo, kind of on the other side, I think coming from more the Uniswap side, maybe walk us through that experience on both sides.
Yeah, so for people who are already on the Celo blockchain, they can now utilize Uniswap for swapping assets. They can also use it for actually providing LP pools. So Uniswap v3 is different from kind of other DEXs where you were able to basically have concentrated liquidity. So concentrated liquidity allows you to kind of set that actual LP band for a specific amount in a specific range rather than the more general price that we see from most DEXs when you LP into a DEX. So that's what you're able to do for Uniswap v3, which is really helpful for different projects that are launching on Celo or have launched on Celo and getting deep liquidity and concentrated liquidity. That's something that Uniswap v3 allows for. And then for people who aren't on the Celo blockchain, this is an opportunity for them to also be able to kind of enter into the Celo blockchain and take advantage of Uniswap v3. And so the great part here is that if you go on the Uniswap website, and you hit kind of the drop-down menu on the application for the different blockchains that Uniswap is on, you can switch from, let's say, Ethereum or Polygon or Arbitrum or Optimism, where it is right now, and then kind of launch onto Celo. That would, of course, require for someone who's not on the Celo blockchain to have bridged over assets so they can actually pay for gas fees. But then, yeah, the purpose here is that anyone can really then use Uniswap on Celo.
Awesome. And so walk us through what DeFi for the people is. I think that's such a fun, kind of phrase and mission that you guys have built out, but kind of walk us through what exactly that is and how that all plugs into this.
Yes. So DeFi for the people was initially launched last year in the fall, and the main purpose was supporting DeFi projects launching on Celo. And so that was a mix of liquidity incentives, grants, marketing support. We were also providing security audits for projects, basically making it so that it was easier for DeFi projects to actually launch on Celo. Now it's been kind of an entire ecosystem of other work where we also kind of look to bring in kind of the ecosystem together and have them collaborate on projects. So that way we can kind of grow the ecosystem and then continue supporting with grants as well as kind of other VC funding. And then marketing support still that still remains. And then what we did here in terms of how DeFi for the people supported the Uniswap launch is we committed about $10 million of incentives or not incentives, sorry. We committed $10 million of rewards for people using Uniswap on Celo. And so that was from kind of this broader fund of the DeFi for the people, which was initially announced the $100 million fund. So that's basically how this works. And it was DeFi for the people essentially partnered with the Climate Collective, which is another ecosystem partner in the Celo ecosystem to basically support ReFi assets that are launching on Celo that are then using Uniswap v3.
So I'd love to kind of walk through what a green asset pool is, how these kind of regenerative assets work in terms of, these liquidity pools, how it's different than other pools that maybe people are used to, what kind of makes the difference. So I'd love if you could just kind of walk us through all of that.
Yeah, so green asset pools are essentially what we're saying is there are kind of it's the pools themselves in that like what are the tokens that are in that pool. So normally if we think of traditional DeFi LP pools, we think of kind of, any token that might be in the world of Web3. In the role in the for a green asset pool, what we're saying is that it's actually in that pool, one of the assets, if not both of the assets, are relating to some aspect of climate. And so initially at launch, what we have is some support for MCO2, which is a refi token that's tied to carbon credits. So that's the initial piece. But moving forward, there's other refi projects that are launching on Celo, and this can vary across kind of carbon credits or representing nature-backed assets. It could really be anything. There's an entire ecosystem of projects that are really building out around this. But for an LP pool here, a green pool is that pool consists of one or two tokens that are tied to nature in one way, shape, or form. And the way that anyone can kind of participate in this is that they can acquire that token through, let's say, Uniswap when they launch, and then LP into that pool. And then so basically serve as an LP into that pool and partake in kind of the transaction fees that are involved with that and the exchange fees.
Now, in the Celo ecosystem, there are nature-backed stablecoins as well. So, are you guys going to have a mix of pools that like are paired with the stablecoin, or what are some of the different pool options that we're going to see?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think we'll see a full mix of things, and it really just depends on different projects that are launching and how they're kind of thinking about their pair. So some of them might think that it's specifically for it's a pair that should be with the Celo token. Others might think that a good pair would be with the Mento stable assets. And so this really depends on kind of what they think of from their pricing standpoint. How do you avoid impermanent loss? And
Right.
really, quite frankly, it's also kind of what others really want as far as the LP pools that are created. It's not so much that we're determining them, but it is up to the ecosystem and other people on the Celo blockchain in determining what are those token pairs that they're looking to be able to trade from and create LP pools for.
Got it. And I know you kind of touched on this towards the beginning, but for projects that are building on top of the Celo blockchain, walk us through a little bit like why this is such a big deal. What kind of doors and new opportunities or new capabilities this will open for them?
So a big piece of Uniswap V3 is allowing for deep liquidity. And that's really important because if you're a refi asset, it's really important to be able to have deep liquidity rather than just generally speaking liquidity. It's actually helpful to have kind of not moving forward from just general liquidity if you can able to concentrate that around a specific range. And the reason why is if we think of refi assets, they're usually tied to some real world piece. It should be tied to some kind of nature capital. And so that price should actually not be kind of as volatile because you are tying it to something that's hard. And so by having deep liquidity, you have a bit more of a stable price. So that allows you to concentrate that liquidity in a specific range. That's very helpful in terms of creating a more liquid market for these assets for people to be able to acquire them and trade them. And then for us, it's also really important in terms of the longer tail solution has also been how do we back the Mento stable assets that are on the Celo blockchain to nature-backed capital. And so a deep liquidity pool is very useful for that because what we can do over time in the Celo ecosystem is essentially over time back the movement of money, the value of money itself to nature-backed assets. And that's been a long vision for the Celo ecosystem since the very start.
So I'd love to hear just a little bit more about like why you are so excited to be working in kind of this refi space and helping to, provide more kind of regenerative options. Like I'd love just to hear a little bit more about like your own experience on like why you're excited to be kind of helping to develop out this piece of the space.
So for me, the reason why I joined Web3 was the opportunity to build something that is new that actually solves kind of some of the most world's pressing problems. And in a way that I think the challenges have historically been we're operating on existing systems. And existing systems aren't necessarily designed or incentivized to be able to solve some of these major problems. And so in this case, why I'm excited about ReFi and Web3 is we have a chance to kind of remake the financial system into one that is actually designed to support the climate rather than be extractive. I think if we look at the history of finance, it's oftentimes been designed to be extractive at the very outset. And in this case, we can say, look, like we can actually create an entirely new system that avoids that problem in the first place because we have lessons from our past. That's where I'm really excited because now we can, take the fact that historically, if we look at the history of money, it was tied to gold, it was tied to other hard assets that the growth of money essentially meant the degradation of our environment. Those two went hand in hand.
Mm.
But in this case, now, if we tie the value of our money to the climate, to nature backed assets themselves, we should see a growth in those nature backed assets because we're essentially incentivizing the growth of that. And I think that's really exciting to me because we can completely change the way that money actually operates and the way we think of money itself.
So if someone's watching this and they're like, "Oh, this sounds exciting. I want to kind of jump more in." Like, where would you recommend someone start? Where's kind of like the next step of them to like either learn more about Celo, or if they are in the Celo ecosystem and they want to, kind of start playing around a little bit more on Uniswap, like, kind of walk us through maybe from both of those perspectives where they should maybe kind of go next to get started on that.
Yeah, so the first place they can start if they just want to learn about the Celo ecosystem itself is to go to the Celo.org website. I think that's a good first landing page. And then from there, I think it's kind of looking at different aspects. So if they're looking at kind of the opportunities around climate, there is a Climate Collective website, and I think they have a lot of information and research with their different partners around regenerative finance. And then I would say other ways to engage is we have a Discord channel, and so there's like a number of community members all there. So if they have questions around, hey, how do I kind of basically join Uniswap, or how do I kind of get a Celo wallet? There's a lot of folks who can answer questions there. And then the last piece is there's a lot of documentation on the Celo.org website for users and builders. And so that's a good way for people to kind of take a look at. And then lastly, I would say I'm active on Twitter. A number of us are also very active on Twitter. So that's another place that we're all really responsive, and we're happy to kind of help provide any support, answer any questions for anyone who's interested.
Awesome. Well, I will definitely link to all of that below. So if, whoever's watching this, if you're interested in checking out the Discord or the website, or connecting with you, Nikhil, on Twitter, I'll have all those links so that it's easy for people just to click right through and kind of continue on from the video. And so, Nikhil, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today and just really break down everything that's happening with Celo and the Uniswap launch and what this looks like for users and developers. So I really appreciate your time coming on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me. It was great chatting with you.